You know this? You know this guy? Oh yeah, good luck. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and you're going to hear from our nation's governors, especially today on this day, the second anniversary of the Dobbs decision. Before we get started, we have a mix in here of some of our national press. We also have our local press, and I would make note to our local folks with an understanding. Minnesota's in the midst of a fairly significant flooding event that is still playing itself out. It is developing hour by hour. I will be glad at the end, once the other governors are done and we finish on the Dobbs piece, to take any questions. We had the State Emergency Operations Center briefing this morning, but even since that time, the situation, especially on the Rapidan Dam by Mankato, has started to deteriorate even a little more. And so those are things that being tracked. I'm being updated as normal every few minutes. But with that being said, it's a real privilege for me to be joined by this set of governors that you're going to hear from today. After the Dobbs decision was made, it became very apparent that women's health choices and their very health were put on the line. It was governors who stood in that breach, governors across the country, those you'll hear from today, and governors all across the country, Democratic governors, that were willing to stand up and make sure that those rights were protected, making sure they provided a safe space for women to be able to get the care that they should have. That situation has deteriorated even more over the subsequent 2 years, with attacks on IVF, with attacks on medical abortion access, with attacks on just basic health decisions that could be made. And so as a group of governors, as a group of folks that are helping to preserve that right, we think it's appropriate today to talk about what that threat is. You're going to get a choice in November, whether it's the vote for President Biden to protect those rights, to continue on making sure that women have bodily autonomy, or to turn that clock back, as Donald Trump said he was so proud to be the architect to bring down Roe versus Wade. So it becomes critically important. I'd also like to note we don't have all of our governors here, but we're at a historic high amongst governors, and you're going to hear from my partner in this and Vice Chair of the Democratic Governors Association, Laura Kelly from Kansas, in just a minute. But we have more women governors than at any time we've had in our nation's history, and that would be Governor Whitmer of Michigan, Governor Hobbs of Arizona, Governor Healy of Massachusetts, Governor Mills of Maine, Governor Kotak of Oregon, Governor Hochul of New York, and Governor Lujan Grisham of New Mexico. These have been our leaders. They have been the folks that have been on the front lines of pushing to make sure the changes that were made to protect the right are there. I'm proud here in Minnesota to be able to work with each and every one of these, especially with my Vice Chair, Laura Kelly.
Thank you, Governor Walz. Well, this is a really special day for me, being from Kansas. You know, it was Kansas who, in August of 2022, took the first action related to the Dobbs. When Kansans came together and voted on whether or not to strip the constitutional amendment, or to strip from our Constitution the right to an abortion in the state of Kansas. Our Supreme Court had just ruled, I think in 2019, that indeed the right to an abortion was included in the Kansas Constitution. And then Dobbs came down in June of 22, and just shortly thereafter, in August of 22, Kansans came together and defeated soundly, 60-40, an amendment that would have stripped women of their constitutional right to an abortion in the state of Kansas. So I am very pleased that they did that, that we were able to lead the way and show the way for other states. We've seen similar action taking place now in Kentucky and Ohio, other very red states. So we know that this issue is not a partisan issue. This issue is a human issue, one of great concern to the men and women of our states and our families. So with that, I'm going to turn to my colleague from Kentucky, Andy Beshear.
Thanks, Laura. Well, thank you to Governor Kelly, and thank you to Governor Walz for having us in Minnesota. When the Dobbs decision came down, it activated a trigger law in Kentucky that put into place what I believe is the most restrictive law on reproductive rights in the entire country. In Kentucky right now, unless the life of the mother is at risk, there are 0 options. That means victims of rape and of incest are told in Kentucky that they have to carry the child of their rapist. That means the rapist has more rights in Kentucky right now than his victim. These are real stories. Whether it was my time as Attorney General prosecuting these cases or brave people like Hadley Duvall, who was with the Vice President just this morning on television, but coming forward to tell her story about how her stepfather started abusing her when she was 5 years old, how when she was 12 she found out she was pregnant. And she is now facing that pain, telling this world about her trauma because she believes other 12-year-olds in Kentucky or Tennessee or states that have these types of laws deserve options, and they do. In my state, if you have a non-viable pregnancy, if you're going to hear your child die moments after it's born, you still have to carry that child. It is wrong. In Kentucky, the Roe v. Wade world doesn't exist anymore, and being pro-choice or pro-life isn't the question in Kentucky anymore. It's a question of, do you believe that victims of rape or incest deserve options? Do you believe parents of non-viable pregnancy deserve options? I don't think that's an issue. I think it is a test of basic human decency. But I will tell you, the people of Kentucky, if they had their choice, would pass that. About 85% plus of the people of Kentucky believe that those exceptions should exist. That shows that this is an issue of empathy that goes beyond any type of analysis that was done pre-Dobbs. And we ought to start thinking about this as being about human beings and not about a political party or a previous political view. And I just say, if you are a candidate right now and you are saying leave things to the states, then you are not pro-exceptions, because it leaves my people out. It leaves the women of Kentucky out. It leaves the victims in Kentucky out that become pregnant through no fault of their own, through a horrible act that violates them. So I think it's incredibly important as we look at this presidential race to see who truly supports our people, to see who truly supports those that have been through the very worst, and will ensure that in every state they have the options they deserve. And let me finally say, our heart goes out to Minnesota, South Dakota for the flooding that's occurring. In July of 2022, we had the worst flooding in state history in Kentucky. It killed 45 people, left thousands homeless. We stand ready to help in whatever way we can. Minnesota doesn't need our help, but we are here to help if asked. I know what that does to a state. I know what that does to the groups of people that are impacted, and I just want to make sure that we are supportive of those families today that are wondering, where they're going to stay, how they're going to rebuild. But we do, each and every time. We're tough people. We're tough as Americans, and I know with the leadership that is here that this state will move forward. I will now turn it over to Roy Cooper.
Thank you, Andy. We are grateful to have Governor Tim Walz as leader of the Democratic Governors Association. We know that his leadership here in Minnesota is strong as well, not just on fighting natural disasters, but also in protecting women's reproductive freedom. And when you look at this issue, we find that Democratic governors often are the last line of defense after the destruction of Roe v. Wade and the battle moves to the states. It makes the work that we did, especially in the 2022 elections, even more important. In 2022, we had the best midterm for governors from the president's party in 36 years. And because of those elections of Democratic governors, we have Democratic governors in Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Kansas, and of course in 2023, Kentucky. The major focus of those campaigns was women's reproductive freedom in 2022. And in fact, if you want to look at the analysis, $59 million came from DGA or DGA affiliates focused on that issue, which was far greater than any other issue. That issue mattered in 2022. It's going to matter in 2024. The biggest governor's race we have right now is in North Carolina. We have Democratic Attorney General Josh Stein against Republican Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, the difference on many issues, but certainly the difference in women's reproductive freedom could not be any more stark. Josh Stein's first ad on abortion is almost entirely in Mark Robinson's words. Women, I hate to even say these things, but I think it's important to say them because he has said them. Women need abortions because they can't, quote, keep their skirts down, end quote. Once women become pregnant, quote, it's not your body anymore, end quote. That's what we're facing in North Carolina. And the status now is that we have a one-vote Republican supermajority in our state legislature. I vetoed a 12-week abortion ban. They were able to override that veto by one vote because every single Republican voted to override, every single Democrat voted to sustain. This governor's race, along with the state legislative races, are going to be critical in 2024 for North Carolina because Republican leadership in North Carolina said they're going to come and do something even more draconian like we've seen in other states, like in Kentucky. And believe you me, Mark Robinson will rubber stamp any severe legislation. He's already said that he wanted no exceptions. 2024 is critical when you look at this presidential race. The difference couldn't be more stark between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Donald Trump has taken credit for the destruction of Roe v. Wade. He deserves credit for that. He would sign a national abortion ban in a New York minute. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are working very hard to protect women's reproductive freedom. Women's lives are on the line in this election in 2024. It's critical that people get out and vote. I now want to introduce a protector of women's reproductive freedom, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers.
That was an amazing story from the Republican candidate. Republican candidate for governor. That is just makes you ill, I will tell you that. So I spent the first 4 years of my my first term fighting issues around reproductive rights. I vetoed several, seemingly every week I was vetoing a bill that was going to take more rights away from women in the state of Wisconsin. Was able to do that, and because we didn't have any supermajorities, and the Democrats made sure that my veto was good. So, going into the Dobbs decision, you know why that happened? It happened because of President Trump and his folks that he put on the U.S. Supreme Court. And 2 years ago from today, 2 million Wisconsin women lost that right. 2 million. 2 of them were my daughters. 7 of them were my granddaughters. So we worked really hard to get the Republican legislature to do something positive about this. It did not work. So for 400 some days, the state of Wisconsin had a 1849 law that frankly was just a pure ban, regardless of the circumstances of that pregnancy. 1849, in case you don't know, there were no women voting then, and there were no women in the Wisconsin legislature. So for 400 days, the women in Wisconsin that needed services that they couldn't get in the state of Wisconsin went to Illinois, went to Minnesota, went to Michigan. Actually, the number of women going to Illinois, using that as an example, for these services went up 600% in those 400 days. So then we come along and we had some success in circuit court in Dane County. We were able to throw out that 1849 law, and we went back to the law of the land of the state of Wisconsin, allowing women to pursue their reproductive health. But we're not done. I mean, we have we will end up, we won that case, we'll end up in the Supreme Court of Wisconsin. Right now, we feel confident around that. The Supreme Court in Wisconsin has another important race coming up this spring, or this next spring. And so that race will be all about this particular issue. But at this point in time, we're in a good place in the state of Wisconsin, but it is absolutely temporary. So I will continue as governor of the state of Wisconsin to veto every bad bill that comes down the line, and also we're going to continue the fight to get more people that are appropriately stationed around the issue. More Democrats in the legislature. We got new maps for the first time in years, which has made a huge difference in the state's politics. So with that, we will be in a much better place, but it is going to be a fight, and the last thing we need in the state of Wisconsin is to lose in the Supreme Court and have an 1849 law be the law of the land. We cannot accept that. I will do everything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen. And with that, I'd like to personally invite Josh Green from the great state of Hawaii to the podium, one of the great Democratic governors in the country. Thanks.
Aloha. A couple things. First, yes, Governor Walz, our hearts are with you as a result of the floods, and I want to say mahalo to all these governors, all the governors in the whole country for supporting us in Hawaii when we went through the Maui wildfires. You guys were extraordinarily generous, and we are healing and recovering, so thank you for that. Okay, another thanks to my grandmother. My grandmother, long ago, my grandma Phyllis, was a president of Planned Parenthood in Western Pennsylvania. I grew up as a little guy, first grandchild, and that was, kind of hammered into me. And I didn't expect to become a governor. I'm a physician. Actually, I'm the only physician governor in the country. But I can tell you, I was with that National Health Service. I went in public service as a result of my grandparents and my parents, who were just really socially oriented. And that was one of the things that I had to make sure I could do, was deliver reproductive care, refer women for abortions if they chose them, talk them through whatever their options were, whatever that meant, whether they were conservative or liberal or one ethnicity or another. They needed access to care. And as a doctor in a countryside, a very rural clinic, I was it for 8,000 people. And I had to, on many occasions, help young women who got pregnant under very terrible circumstances like were described to find their way to a Planned Parenthood clinic or to an OBGYN so that they could do what they chose to do. And so as a physician, I think it's very important. That's one thing I wanted to share. Two, Hawaii was the first state to legalize abortion in 1970, the year I was born. And 78, we ensconced in our Constitution protections for privacy. And so we are that state. We are all in to protect women's reproductive rights no matter what. And then in 23, after the changes that were mentioned before nationally at the court level, we stepped in and put into statute protection for women and providers, no matter what, so that they can practice medicine the way they or their patients may want. They may not even be a pro-choice doctor, but they have to practice based on what their patients' needs are. And that's really where my heart is. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll say it loud and clear politically, I don't normally get into national politics. I'm out in Hawaii doing what we do. But I will say this, I really don't feel that the former president, President Trump, cares about everyone. I think he cares about himself, and that leaves women out in this particular case. And that's a harsh thing to say, but when you allow women to lose their health care rights, that means you don't care about them. So I hope that women all across the country, conservative, liberal, moderate, apolitical, I hope that they don't vote for him. They can choose their path. You know who I favor. I favor Joe. But I don't think someone who doesn't care enough to protect a person's health care rights can run this country. Aloha. And I would like to introduce the exceptional governor who has just been a wonderful mentor to me, particularly on environmental issues, Governor Inslee, who came to my state and took the stage and was just very generous just a week ago. Thank you.
Well, you just heard the softest criticism of Donald Trump by any Democratic governor. If the aloha spirit was tempering your views. which we mahalo. Look, this is not the second anniversary of the Dobbs decision. It's the second anniversary of the Trump decision and the Trump assault on women's rights, which is a continuing clear and present danger to the rights of women and our whole families, because men care about this as well, in the United States. And I think that's a really important point. People think that somehow he's already done the damage that he could do, and so you don't have to worry about the guy anymore. Well, you have to worry about him because he wants to do to legislators and governors' offices and the U.S. Congress what he did to the U.S. Supreme Court, which is to make sure that he puts people there that will do his bidding to continue to take away rights of women from in the United States of America. It is still a clear and present danger. He presents it, and we're seeing it in my state. Look, my state has been fundamentally pro-choice and has been one of the earliest after Hawaii to recognize the women's rights. But those efforts continue in our state. You know, we have a candidate, the leading candidate for the Republican nomination for my position, has been anti-choice his entire career in Congress. He's voted time and time and time against a women's right of choice when he was in the U.S. Congress. But now he says, you don't have to worry about me. Well, you know, a leopard can't change its spots, and a Republican who's been after a women's right of choice for decades can't change their spots either. And his efforts to masquerade somehow as a choice politician are laughable, frankly. His name is Dave Reichert, by the way. I don't know how to spell it. You guys can look it up. So, and sometimes I wonder if he's been kidnapped and there's an imposter somehow running for governor on the Republican side of the ticket. And this is the situation where Republicans now, including Donald Trump, are trying to camouflage the continued threat that they pose, because they want to win this battle to take away women's rights state by state till longer there's no one state where this freedom exists. And this is something that should bind us together as Americans. We feel this. Our number of abortions that we have provided for women from out of state have gone up 50% since the Trump decision. And it gives us a flavor of how we are all connected in this country. But they want us to be disconnected and beat women's rights down state by state. And people need to be aware of that. Now, we're fighting a tooth and tongue in our state. We stockpiled mifepristone so we would be safe from any adverse Supreme Court decision. I issued an executive order last week which will make sure that under state law, women can get access in an emergency regardless of what happens with the U.S. Supreme Court. So we can be protected in state law. But we shouldn't have to run this risk that currently exists, and I hope that we will continue to succeed.
Thanks, Jay.
I think we're done for questions. Tim, are you going to
Ready?
say something?
No,
Yeah.
we're ready for questions. And thank you to all this group. And we represent tens of millions of people, very diverse across the country. But geography should not be destiny, and geography should not be the thing that puts you at risk. And as you're seeing that this hodgepodge that has been created is not the way to go. With that, any questions for any of the governors?
Governor, this decision, you know, restoring Roe, is that really going to be enough? Because you know what happened in Minnesota and all of the restrictions they were able to impose, even when Roe was the law of the land. So what is the ultimate goal here for reproductive rights for women?
Yeah, and I think we've learned our lesson, and certainly, as I said, and these folks would join in from IVF to, look, this is about birth control in general. This is about contraception, that they're going after that, the rest of it. So no, I think the answer is no, it's not enough. We learned that here, that we have to be proactive. Governor Evers has found out, it just this constant drumbeat of trying to push stuff back, that we took the opportunity here to strengthen those things. So no, I think that's exactly right. And this is fundamental. And Jay is right, that they're trying to hide who they are. And it's the same thing they'll do on voting rights. It's the same thing they'll do on taxation. It's the same thing they'll do on destroying our public education. This is just one that is so real to people, and it's not theoretical. It's here amongst us. So no, I think anything we can do to strengthen those. I think there's a lot of states here that have given us roadmaps. We in Minnesota took that move here, but it should be noted. And I think it's because we get in our mind made up on this, and I'm glad that Governor Kelly made note of this. It was Kansas that led this fight in the beginning, made the case. A rural state in the middle of America, not normally known for leaning into that, but what they are known for is protecting women's rights and caring about freedom. So,
If I could follow
yeah.
up on that. I think we saw what we saw in Kansas because, you know, we came into the Union as a free state. And people in Kansas really value that. They value freedoms for others, but they also value freedoms for themselves. And the way that we were able to defeat that amendment was by couching it in that term, that because that's what it is. It's really taking away freedom from somebody to decide their own fate. And I think that's an important thing going forward, that we recognize that, this really isn't about abortion. This is really about a woman being free to make her own choices.
I have a question for Governor Kelly. So you're one of the only woman up here today. How would you characterize?
There are 7 more of me elsewhere.
How would you characterize women's role in state government in regards to reproductive rights at this moment in time, years after Dobbs?
Well, obviously, I think it's incredibly important, but I also think it's important that we have our male colleagues being so verbal and so out there on this issue, because this really is an attack on women. And obviously, we're going to fight back and fight for that freedom. But to have our male counterparts out there side by side with us makes all the difference.
I don't know if it's the best answer to this, but how visceral of an issue is this cycle? Obviously, the midterms was right after it had been overturned. This was top of mind for voters. I know for folks who are out campaigning for other governors or legislators, how much are you hearing about this?
Well, you can hear, I'll ask Governor Cooper, maybe he's got a race that's in his state, Washington State or whatever. Look, it's still critically important to people. Now, people take totality. They're going to be thinking the economy. They're going to be thinking climate change. They're going to be thinking foreign policy when we get on this. But this is one that is very personal to people. It's not theoretical. It's very much baked. Republicans keep trying to tell you, oh, this issue's over or whatever. Keep saying that because it's far from over. So I think it's going to play a major role in it. And I would let, maybe Roy or Andy. I don't see it. You live.
I did. It's so powerful because it is so important that in 2023 in Kentucky as a Democrat, I ran ads on it. And part of the reason we were able to run ads on it is it's not just the people up here, it's people like Hadley. It is survivors that are willing to share their pain and their story about what some of these draconian laws truly do. And I said earlier, I think it is a basic test of decency, but also empathy. My faith certainly tells me we're supposed to love our neighbors as ourselves, and sympathy is the easy part of that, but empathy is maybe that true and real test. But I believe that it is incredibly important in the 2024 cycle. We saw it in every piece of data that we had, and there was no response in my race. What my opponent tried to do was go back to the Roe v. Wade world, which didn't exist. Then he said, how many weeks? And I said, well, right now in Kentucky it's 0. How about more than 0? I mean, that's where some of our states are. And that's why this is an important federal issue. Because there shouldn't be a state in the United States of America where victims of rape and incest should have no options and where someone has to carry a non-viable pregnancy. That's just wrong. And I think that Joe Biden is giving voice to that. I believe his opponent is not and would leave it to the states, which again leaves our people out.
Maybe I can add something. I have a data point to share with you on that question. I think an issue is devastating when the other side wants to run from it and try to hide from it. Then they're really in trouble. And in my state, that's what's happened. So we have a fellow running for my seat, his name's Dave Reichert, who has a long decades history of voting against a women's right of choice in the U.S. Congress. And the very first thing he did in his campaign of any note is to send out ads saying, you don't have to worry about me on choice. When a campaign is running away from who they are fundamentally, in their deepest fiber of being with multiple decades of congressional votes, they've got a problem, and they know they've got a problem. And they're going to get smoked out on it. Now, unfortunately, the Republican Party is in the thrall of a cult at this point. It's an anti-choice cult. They're following a cult leader over the cliff, and they're trying to do it in virtually every race in the United States. And that's my point. They're trying to do this in every state race and every governor's race, to put a group of people who are following this cult leader now, who's destroyed the right of choice in this country and aims to do it in every single one of our states. as long as it takes. And that's why we're here today.
You need to speak more openly next time, Governor Inslee, about how you really feel, and so I appreciate it. So, Alexander.
Yeah, thank you guys for doing this. The first presidential debate is coming up on Thursday, and it's going to be the first time, at least this year, that voters will have the direct contrast between President Biden and former President Trump. What are your expectations for the president, and what are the stakes for him to draw that contrast on this issue of reproductive rights, but also more broadly?
I think obviously President Biden will be ready for this debate. I feel strongly that he has a great story to tell about the work that he has done to improve the Trump economy, which was in shambles during and right after COVID. He'll also, as he's talked to each one of us, he'll also get a chance to empathize too with the American people, knowing that things are costing more and that everything that he is doing is trying to make life better for them instead of Donald Trump. You know, we just expanded Medicaid in North Carolina. We have almost 500,000 people who now have health insurance, but Donald Trump wants to take their health insurance cards away. He came close while he was president. He came within one vote while he was president. So these are the contrasts that I think President Biden will be able to bring out during this debate. When Donald Trump gets up there, there will be wild accusations, and you know I don't know how it's going to turn out at the end of the day for him, but I do know that President Biden is a good man who cares deeply about this country. Donald Trump cares about himself. Period. End of story.
Question for Governor Evers. In a state like yours that could decide the 2024 presidential election, what kind of resources will be put forward to make abortion rights a central issue in your state for the presidential race? Well, certainly, I talk about it a lot. Certainly, the folks that come to our state, and there are a lot of them coming to our state from the administration and other places, talk about it. But at the end of the day, I believe it's going to be about the down ballot in the state of Wisconsin. We're going to have Democrats winning at a pace that we haven't seen in decades. Every one of those Democratic candidates will have abortion on the issue. So regardless of what happens at the upper level, at the local level, at state assembly and state senate, there's going to be more. We've had more. This is the biggest number of Democrats that have ever run for office in the state of Wisconsin. We have new maps. Many of them are going to win. We anticipate that the politics of Wisconsin will change dramatically after this, and the issue around reproductive rights is going to be talked about by every one of those Democrats that are running for office, and that will make a difference in the race, no question about it.
Thank you all. Grateful. Thanks, folks. Yes, sir. Thanks, Andy.